Hi, my name is Heather Truschel. I am mental health specialist, clinical supervisor with the CAYAC program, and I'm here today to talk to you about school avoidance and mental health. So we decided to bring this as a topic for our mental health series because we get a lot of calls, especially recently. We've been getting a lot of calls from families, from schools, other providers about school avoidance, and a lot of parents and providers aren't really sure, what to do. And there's just feels like there's like a sense of hopelessness around school avoidance. And so, myself I and my team wanted to look into resources and research about this topic to be able to provide some support and strategies for families around school avoidance. So school avoidance is, I'm going to talk a little bit about, what school avoidance looks like. And I might use the words school avoidance or school refusal interchangeably during this presentation. But what it looks like, it could look like a student is just completely absent from school, that they're not attending school at all. The student may go to school, but then they may miss certain classes. Or maybe they will go to school and then say that they're not feeling well or that they're needing a break. And so they maybe go to the nurse's office or the counselor's office and maybe miss, portions of the day. Also, the student may go to school, but then maybe have outbursts or so much emotional distress that they're begging to come home, and the parents come or caregivers come and pick them up from school. And it really can be on a continuum of this. And it could also just be that they may miss just a few days within a school year, or it could be long periods of time. And I would suggest if it's becoming more of this long period of time, like longer than maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks, that's really a time to maybe reach out for some supports, either through the school or other supports in the community, which I'm going to be talking about. So when I was looking up statistics on school avoidance, school refusal, the research that I could find didn't really have like a specific number out there. And I think it's because, just like I mentioned before, that there is a continuum of like what school avoidance, school refusal looks like. But also I think it's hard to kind of figure out, is this school avoidance or is this just regular excused absences? And then also because of the pandemic, I think it's really kind of skewed some of those statistics out there. But from what I was able to find, research shows that about 5 to 28% of youth display school refusal behavior at some point in their lives. So at any time during that K through 12 period, they might, display, again, maybe just missing a few days of school to missing longer period of time. And that on any given day, 2 to 5% of absences are due to school refusal. And the research that I was seeing now, and I think there's going to be more and more research out there because of the pandemic, showing that these numbers may have significantly gone up to 30% in some areas, where that any time that school absences may be due to school avoidance. And so one thing I wanted to point out was the difference between school avoidance and truancy. So they're different, and sometimes the way they're treated at school may be similar, but I would argue that, that they are, different things and should be treated differently. So for school avoidance is due to emotional distress. So like anxiety, depression, somatic symptoms related to going to school. Whereas with truancy, there doesn't appear to be an emotional distress about going to school. With the school avoidance, parents are aware of the school absences or school refusal, whereas with truancy, the parents may not be aware that the student may be going to school and or saying they're going to school and not, and so the parents aren't sure what's going on. School avoidance, there's a lack of like conduct or behavioral issues related to the school avoidance, where with truancy, there might be presence of the conduct and behavioral issues. With school avoidance, the child, when they're absent, they'll be home. Whereas with truancy, during that absence, then the child may not be at home. So they might be at a friend's house or, out and about and whatnot. So again, that's a little bit different And then also too, with school avoidance, the student may still, even though they're not going to school, they might still be willing to do the schoolwork and assignments when they're home. Whereas with truancy, the child is not willing to do those type of things. It's really just not wanting to be a part of school and whatnot. So again, wanting to sort of talk about how these aren't really the same thing, and then they shouldn't be treated the same way. Although with truancy, I would want to point out too that, I would argue that some of the behaviors that are causing truancy may have like a mental health component as well. So some of the causes for school avoidance, one cause could be that, there's changes in the class or school transitions. With the pandemic, there's definitely, we've had years of school transitions where kids are, learning remotely and then back in school and then, having to quarantine and whatnot. And so I think because of, some of all of those changes and uncertainties, that's one of the reasons why we're seeing such an uptick in school avoidance. Also perfectionism, this worry of not doing things the right way or perfectly and whatnot. And so just wanting to avoid, doing that or avoid some of that, those feelings around that. Also, bullying could be, a reason for school avoidance, not wanting to deal with certain students, not feeling safe at school. A new teacher, again, maybe creating some sort of anxiety or feeling of uncertainty or unsafe. Also learning difficulties. So if, a child has a learning disability or learning difficulties that haven't been identified yet by the school, that can be really hard. And so maybe wanting to avoid some of those challenges and shame around some of those things. Also kids who have ADHD are often are redirected more often than other students. And so they may be wanting to not go to school to avoid some of that. And then also just general, just anxiety disorders in general. So like generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, or certain phobias, those might translate into the school experience as well. So those are sort of the causes sort of behind why somebody might want to avoid going to school. And so when we start to think about how we can change that behavior and how we can make it better, it's important to sort of think of what the function might be. So the function is the reason for that behavior or the need that the child is trying to meet in a maladaptive way, an unhealthy way. And functions typically are having to deal with either the avoidance of something negative or trying to seek out some sort of positive experience. And so we're going to be talking about these 4 areas in more detail. So for avoidance of negative experience, one reason a child might be avoiding school is to avoid something or a situation that causes distress, or to avoid a social or evaluative situation that's causing distress. And then for the pursuit of positive experiences, there may be seeking out attention, like attention-seeking behaviors, or receiving tangible reinforcements or reward outside of school. And I think it's important to point out that there may not just be one function behind a child's behavior, in regards to school avoidance or any type of behavior, but so there could be several of these different functions, but also too, some could start out as one function and then kind of change into another one. So for example, if a child is, avoiding going to school because they have test anxiety, and then they're able to stay home from school and they're able to, be on the computer all day, that can change from once they were avoiding that negative evaluative experience, and now they're receiving a tangible reinforcement for staying home. So we're going to talk specifically about each of these functions and sort of what it could look like in a child. So the first one is avoiding distress at school. So this is like that there's something that happened at school that's causing distress or fear. So it could be maybe something happened on the bus or in the cafeteria. Maybe there's a fire alarm that went off one day that was really, scary or whatnot. And so this can be typically for younger kids because it may be hard for them to be able to identify and actually verbalize what it is that's causing their anxiety. And there may be more physical symptoms with this anxiety. So complaining of stomach aches or complaining that their head hurts or that they're not feeling well. Again, this somatic symptoms that are coming up to try to avoid some of this fear or anxiety at school. The other one is avoiding a stressful social or evaluative situation. So this is avoiding shame, ridicule, embarrassment from peers and or from the school staff. So this could be maybe having some fear or anxiety about like interacting with other kids at school, like during recess time or in the lunchroom, or doing group work, those type of things. Or having to give a presentation and taking a test or talking in front of the class. So really trying to avoid those sort of social situations or situations where they feel like they're being, graded or are given feedback and whatnot, because it creates a lot of anxiety around that. And this is typically for older kids, 11 to 17, and then usually they're able to identify and speak to specifically what's causing them anxiety. So for attention-seeking behavior, this is when a child is maybe avoiding school to seek attention or sympathy from their caregiver or from the school staff. And they may exaggerate emotional physical symptoms, like feeling sick, not having a stomach ache, headache, those type of things. And there may be a lot of tardies or trying to go home early or going to the nurse or the counselor's office, again, maybe to seek out some of those behaviors or seeking out that attention. And this may, and one of the things that would be important to sort of figure out is it related to separation anxiety. So separation anxiety would be different than anxiety about something that's happening at school. Now the anxiety is around leaving that caregiver, and so trying to avoid leaving that caregiver. And then the final function is seeking positive reinforcements. So this is where kids get tangible rewards or reinforcements from not going to school. So this could be that they get to sleep in or stay in bed, play video games, stay on social media, TV, hang out with friends. And there's an increased distress when they're not getting this experience. So if this is something that's getting taken away, this can create more distress for the child. And I think it's also important to point out too that with this type of function, sometimes kids have irregular sleep patterns. So if they are staying home and they're sleeping all day, then they may be staying up all night, playing video games or, on their phones or whatnot, which can add some extra challenges when trying to get them back into school, because now the sleep patterns have changed and whatnot. Okay, so now we're going to talk specifically about different type of interventions, different interventions specific to these different functions that we were talking about. But first, I'm going to talk about like some general approaches. So the first approach, when you're starting to see some of these behaviors of school avoidance or school refusal, is try to return to school as early as possible. With anxiety, when we avoid something, that's actually causing a negative reinforcement through relief, right? When something gives us really a lot of anxiety and then we don't do that thing, then we feel, oh my gosh, that feels so good. I shouldn't ever do that thing because this feels so much better, right? And so that can be that can add more of a challenge to overcome. So the sooner that the child's able to get back into school, even if it's for half a day or just for the morning or just to get to the door at school, those type of things, if you this quicker that you're able to get to do those things, the easier it may be to get back into the routine of going to school. And then, as I mentioned before, seeking out supports, through therapy or whatnot could be helpful. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some different types of therapies that could be helpful. So the first one is called exposure therapy. So this is the gradual increase to exposure to something that's causing fear or anxiety. So again, it's not, maybe going back to school for the whole day, right away type of thing, but how can we gradually increase and build that that tolerance for that fear and anxiety, and also that confidence to be able to tolerate that fear and whatnot when we're in that situation. And then systematic desensitization, that's the gradual increase to be able to handle fear and anxiety provoking thoughts. So that's more for those situations where worried about like what kids might be saying about them in the lunchroom, or worried about giving a presentation. So this is to be able to gradually tolerate some of those thoughts that are giving us anxiety. And then cognitive behavioral therapy, this helps to challenge negative thoughts that impact our behavior and feelings. So again, those sort of negative thoughts like everyone will laugh at me, and being able to think about that in a different way that's more helpful to help with help with coping skills or how I feel about something. And then dialectical behavioral therapy, this is a type of therapy that helps to give skills to manage some of those really intense emotions. Another type of therapy that can be helpful is called eye movement desensitization reprocessing, or EMDR. And that's a type of therapy that's helpful with anxiety, because sometimes with anxiety, we sort of create these maladaptive thoughts about something, that we can't handle this, that it's that it's unsafe, and whatnot. And it helps to sort of process these thoughts or these memories that we may have in a more adaptive way, that we can handle things, that we have been able to deal with really strong hard things and whatnot. And then something else that can be really helpful is family therapy or parent coaching. And I would say this is something that's especially helpful, in regards to, kids who may not go to therapy. It's not uncommon for kids who are avoiding going to school then to also avoid going to therapy, because that could be something that I'm going to talk to this person who's going to try to get me go to this thing that I don't want to go to. And so they may not want to go to therapy. And so I think it can be helpful, like with parent coaching or family therapy, where the child may not be, involved, or may not be involved at first. I feel like it can be helpful to empower families and caregivers, that there are things that you can do to help be part of the solution. Also to seeking out support from the school. If a child is diagnosed with anxiety or ADHD or depression, it's possible for them to qualify for what's called a 504 plan. So that's to give some accommodations to kids at school to sort of help provide support around those issues. And especially now, with what I was mentioning about, like with the pandemic and just seeing this increase of school refusal, schools now more than ever, I think, are trying more creative ways to think about these things and how to help kids get back into school and to stay in school. And so, reaching out to the school counselor, reaching out to a mental health specialist at the school, the teacher, anyone that you feel like a connection with or an alignment with, to sort of help you to navigate that. And then also to another possibility could be medication. And so that's really, up for every family to, to think about like what makes sense for their family, what they feel comfortable with, and sometimes medication, when I talked about medication with families, is really to think about, when we're in so much distress and so much unable to tolerate some of these negative feelings, sometimes, medication can be part of the treatment to sort of help with that. And sometimes people will start with therapy and see how that goes and sees if it can be helpful, or is adding medication, could that be another piece? Sometimes too, with those kids who may not be going to therapy, medication, starting that first, sometimes that can be helpful and sort of kind of prime the pump to, get them to a place where they are ready, and have sort of that confidence that they are able to handle some of these emotions, in therapy, and to be able to then learn those skills to further that along. But again, going back to what I was talking about before, it's these are some general things that can be helpful, but really, drilling down to like what the function of the behavior is, can be really helpful to think of some strategies specific for that function, to sort of change some of those behaviors. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So for the kids who are avoiding distress at school, so again, maybe something happened at school that they are avoiding, or something is causing anxiety, or whatnot. What's going to be helpful is that gradual exposure to that anxiety provoking situation. So again, not just throwing them into school, like needing to go and sort of face that fear, but how can they gradually build up that tolerance to it, or build up that confidence to be able to manage that. And so that's where therapy can be helpful. Also, some of these things can also be helpful, like relaxation skills. So teaching relaxation skills, not when they're feeling anxious, but like in times when they're not feeling anxious. So some of the relaxation skills that I like to teach kids are deep breathing, guided imagery, and a technique that is called 5 things. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about these, but really, I think it's important to, find something that fits for your family or for the kids. Sometimes things that may seem relaxing for one person aren't relaxing for, somebody else. But so just really trying to figure out maybe some of those skills that could be helpful. And so one that, I feel it can be helpful is, again, like deep breathing. And so teaching kids what's called square breathing. And so that's where you inhale for 4 seconds, and then hold it for 4 seconds, and then exhale for 6 seconds. And so in doing that several times, just deep breathing sometimes can just help us to get to a place, where we're able to just be able to think about, what's going on, and have some insight to some of the feelings that we may be having, and possibly some solutions or ways to manage it. Another one is guided imagery, just thinking about like a calm, safe space, and I would just, to suggest, if you're imagining a calm, safe place, to, to also think about like, what does it sound like? What does it, what smells do you notice? What are you hearing? Like using those 5 senses, because that can really help to strengthen that calm feeling. And reminding the child that they can go back to that calm space whenever they're feeling anxious or thinking about something that's really hard. Another technique that's called 5 things, and that's a grounding technique, where you can just sit and look around you and list 5 things that you can see. Name 4 things that you can touch, even with your body. Like, you can feel the chair on your back, or your feet on the ground, or whatever it might be. 3 things that you hear, 2 things that you smell, and 1 thing that you touch or taste, excuse me, 1 thing that you can taste. And so again, these are just a technique to kind of help to get out of that, that mind, that part of our mind where we're just are thinking about what's scaring us, that tunnel thinking, and being able to think more about our thoughts, our feelings, and possible solutions. Also too, again, when the child is anxious, but being able to, when they're in a calm place, to be able to talk about anxiety. What does anxiety look like? What does it feel like in their body? How do they know that they're feeling anxious? What are the thoughts that they're having? And then also, what are some of the things that they can do, to deal with that anxiety. And so, so being able to talk about that stuff, talk about like how you're feeling, how you're thinking, and what are some different strategies that they can do when they are feeling or thinking those things that can help with that anxiety. Again, I think it's important to be able to address and help build their self-esteem and their confidence that they can handle hard things. That yes, they may be feeling anxious, and yes, this is a very hard thing, but they can do it, and that you believe in them, and and that's why you're supporting them, or that's why you're helping them get therapy to help support them as well. Also, too, what can be helpful is having an older sibling or a friend provide support at school, or sort of model, being able to, go to school or get on the bus or whatnot. That can also be something that is helpful as well. So for the situations where a child may be avoiding a stressful social or evaluative situation, again, that gradual exposure to real life experiences will be helpful. To the gradual exposure to thinking about some of those negative thoughts that they may be having about taking a test, or talking in front of people, or working in a group setting. And so again, maybe doing what's called cognitive restructuring. And so that may be challenging any negative thoughts that they may be having. So they may be having a thought like that everyone will laugh at them. And so being able to challenge that and help them think about, well, can they handle that? Is that something that they could handle? Like, what actually would happen if somebody was laughing at them? Would they die? Would they be hurt, physically hurt in any way? Probably not, right? And so maybe being able to help them to think like, yeah, I can handle this. I won't be physically hurt if somebody was laughing at me. And these are the things that I can do to help me to manage that, because that's still something that's very hard, right? And again, so providing psychoeducation, talking about anxiety, what it looks like, what it feels like. Again, just building sort of that insight to sort of what's going on to them internally, and sort of awareness of like what's happening. Social skills training can be helpful, or role play with a therapist or with, a caregiver, about those situations, like how to, meet a new person, or if they are being laughed at, how to handle that, right? Or how could they respond in a different way or a helpful way? Or practicing their, if they have to do a presentation, practicing that in front of family or whatnot, to sort of build positive experiences in that confidence that they can handle that. And so again, I think it's really important to validate the feelings that they are having. And yes, this is very hard, and I believe that you're able to do this, and really celebrate any small successes. I think it's really important to say, to point out again that, it may not be that, they go from not going to school to going to school right away, that it might take, some time to get back to that place. But so celebrating those small successes, and also not expecting that you're going to get 100% success, and understanding that when you're trying something and it doesn't work, that's an opportunity to change that strategy and say, that didn't really work. What can we do differently? What did you need instead? How could we maybe break this down into a smaller goal, right? And so I think that's something that's really important is again, like not expecting 100% success, but trying 100% of the time. And then so for attention-seeking behavior, again, so these are for kids who may be seeking attention from their caregivers, seeking attention at school, with counselors or with nurses or whatnot, or teacher. And so for these kids, I think it's really important to have clear messages and expectations. So really like direct, simple commands, in the morning, when you're getting ready for school, to make sure that you're not saying things vaguely like, oh, it's 7 o'clock, or there's your backpack, or giving these long, winded, you need to do this and 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 this, and then meet me at the car. Just really direct and simple commands. Because really, passivity is their greatest weapon against you. The longer they're able to sort of engage in diddle-dallying or kind of this back and forth with you, the easier it's going to get. You're going to get to a place of frustration, and easier for them to sort of get that need met to seeking attention. And so really, you can do what's called planned ignoring of inappropriate behaviors. So, not engaging if they keep asking questions, letting them know, hey, I've already answered that question. I'm not going to answer it again. It's time to go to school. And then also, follow the 3 B's. So if you're not burning, bleeding, or broken, then you're going to school. And I know with COVID that sort of changed, may have changed some of that, but you can sort of add that into there too, like that you needing to follow what are the COVID policies at this time, and talking with the school, about that as well, so that they know, like, this is the clear expectation, this is what the school said, and this is when you can go back to school, and following that. And if you have any concerns about that being used in a way to stay out of school, to talk with that school, the school nurse or the COVID coordinator about your concerns, that you're worried that they're using some of these symptoms to stay out of school, and talk about how that might be addressed, with the school. I think it's also important to have clear evening and morning routines, to help just create like that expectation of this is what we do in the evening to get ready for school, and in the morning to make sure that you have enough time, to address any of these sort of behaviors in the morning time, to be able to get out, in a timely fashion. And then also like limit any reinforcers if they do stay home. So again, like, as they're kind of going through this process, of helping them to get back into school, if for whatever reason they do stay home, and you think that the reason why they're staying home is seeking that positive attention from you, might try to limit some of that reinforcement at home, reminding them, so now you're at home, you're going to be doing schoolwork, we're not watching TV, you're not hanging out with mommy, and so that may be something that could be helpful as well. Also, a behavior chart or a point system, sometimes that can be helpful as well, to help promote some of these positive behaviors. And again, my biggest thing that I always suggest to families if they choose to do a behavior chart or do a point system, it has to be something that you buy into, because you're the one who has to sort of maintain that. And also notice too, if you're not seeing success with that behavior chart and you're doing it consistently, then maybe needing to break it down into even smaller parts as well. So then for seeking positive reinforcements, so this is for those kiddos who are not going to school because they are receiving rewards and reinforcements when they're at home, like, so, watching TV, social media, being on the computer, video games, whatever it might be. So for these kids, what I would suggest is really trying to limit that behavior if they do stay home. So if they stay home, they're not going to be able to be on their computer. They're not going to be able to be, on their phone or computer or go see their friend or those type of things. And that if they are going to school, then they can actually earn extra time with those reinforcers. And something I think that can be helpful, and not only for this type of function, but for a lot of the different functions, is what's called collaborative problem solving. And that was developed by a psychologist, Dr. Ross Green. And it's a way to be able to talk with kids about maybe some of the concerns that you may be having, and get their sort of buy-in on it. Because I think it can be really easy for parents to know, or any adult to know, like, hey, if you just did these things, all these problems would go away if you just did this. But as we know, especially as with teenagers, it's really important for them to come to those sort of conclusions for themselves, and to to just encourage sort of that independence, that they're kind of striving for. And so I'll talk a little bit about collaborative problem solving, and at the end there's some resources to look more into this. But so how it sort of starts out is that the adult we'll ask the child, like, hey, I've noticed that you're not going to school. The last couple of days you haven't been going to school. And what's going on? What's up? And so at that time, the adult really listens to what's going on with the child, really trying to drill down to what's going on, and empathize with the child. Like, if the child says, yeah, I haven't been going to school because I have this test coming up and I just don't want to, do it. I'm worried about it, and so really being able to say, wow, that sounds really hard. That test sounds like it's really stressing you out, and so then the adult can then share what their worry and concern is. Well, I'm worried that if you don't go to school, then it's going to start to impact your grades. And I'm worried that you're going to start to feel really overwhelmed. And then asking the child, what can we do about it? And invite them to think of a solution. And if, and my suggestion would be is if they're giving a solution, if it's something that you might not think like it's going to work or whatnot, as long as that's something that the child is willing to try out, I would suggest trying it, and then if doesn't work, then again, that's your opportunity to like come back and have this conversation again and say, hey, that didn't sort of work out. Like, let's think about why that didn't work. What can we do differently? And again, so that's just is building sort of their autonomy, their ownership of the problem, and for them to help, kind of think about what they could do, to address it. And so I wanted to share some resources for you all. So where I got some of this information. One website that I came across, I think that has some really great resources for families, is called School Avoidance, schoolavoidance.org. Also, you can, on that website, like, you can give your email address, and they send you a pamphlet about how to work with schools around school avoidance, and talks about like 504 plans, IEPs, and whatnot. And then the collaborative problem solving website, the cpsconnection.com, that's a resource that has more information about like that collaborative problem solving strategy. Also, some books that I think can be really helpful. There's one called Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD, and that's by Eli R. Lebowitz. And he talks a lot about anxiety and how families can be empowered to help kids sort of manage that, and to build their confidence to be able to manage that. And then another one is called The Explosive Child, and that's by Ross Green again. And again, just talking about how to have more about like collaborative problem solving and whatnot. And if you have also any further questions about school avoidance, or how to get connected to a therapist, how to connect with your school, you can definitely reach out to the CAYAC team through the Connections program. And our main line is 970-221-3308. And like I said, definitely feel free to reach out, and we can talk with a mental health specialist like myself, and talk a little bit more about what sort of is going on, and maybe what are some resources or referrals that could be helpful. Thank you.